This week on Generating Alpha, I sat down with Antonio Gracias, founder of Valor Equity Partners, one of the most distinctive and influential investment firms in technology. Valor has backed many of the defining companies of the past 2 decades and built an operating model trusted by founders tackling the world's hardest problems. Antonio is one of the few true first principles thinkers in investing. A lifelong student of physics in the human brain, he's developed a systems-driven approach to decision-making, becoming an early investor and board member at Tesla, SpaceX, Solar City, and The Boring Company, while also guiding companies like Warby Parker, GoPuff, and Guild Education through rapid scale. In our conversation, he breaks down the evolution of valor, the physics-based frameworks that guide his investing, how he evaluates founders over long arcs, and the biggest lessons from 2 decades working closely with Elon Musk. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the podcast and rate it 5 stars on Spotify, subscribe to the YouTube, and share it to anyone who might find it valuable. I really enjoyed recording this episode, and I hope you guys enjoy listening. Thank you. Thank you, Antonio, for making the time. I really appreciate it.
And it's nice to see you.
So I'd love to start where I always start, the beginning. Tell me a little about your childhood and kind of the environment you grew up in, and in what ways do you think it was unique from your kind of average American childhood?
Oh man, I'm the child of immigrants. I was the only one in my family born here. My parents are from India. My mom from Spain, Madrid, Spain, and I was born in Detroit, grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and so I was the only Spanish-speaking kid in my high school, which was a little unique. I think from most Americans at that time. This is in the 70s and the 80s. So that made it unique. And in other ways, it was like very much a Goldilocks childhood. We had enough resources that we could do almost anything, but not so much we could do nothing, right? We really had to work, and my parents were super focused on values and on working really hard. That we were given a lot of gifts, a lot of intellectual gifts, and that we had a responsibility to do something with those gifts to give back to society. So I have two brothers two brothers who are doctors, two sisters who are both dentists, and I'm the lone black sheep of the family that ended up in the investment business.
And you go off to Georgetown, if I'm correct, to the School of Foreign Service, the renowned School of Foreign Service.
Yeah,
And during your time there, you do something which I think of as relatively unique, which is studying Japanese pretty intensely.
yeah.
Um, and you kind of credit learning Japanese on top of both English and Spanish of shaping your thinking. So I'm interested if you could kind of like explain how you think learning Japanese shaped your thinking and what's different about kind of if a person were to learn English as their first language and then Japanese or something else as their first language. And I'd love for you to use examples specifically Japanese.
Yeah, I mean, so look, what I know now, what I didn't know then, but kind of how I think about it now is the language is how we program the brain, right? So memory starts to form around the same time we form language. And so it is the language you learn, the logic pattern of the language you learn is actually how you construct the logic pattern of your brain. And Japanese has a different logic pattern than English. So English, is a language that has a very linear logic pattern, and Japanese is a language that has topic particle markers that mark things like the object and the subject, the sense, etc. And you can move them around a little bit, right? And so you get a bit of a nonlinear logic pattern. It's still very solid logic. You can think that way, but it is different. And so, when you have these communication problems between people speaking Japanese and English, it's often because they actually the translation doesn't translate meaning because the language itself in translation doesn't convey the meaning. And the best example of this is the Japanese hi, right? So hi means yes in Japanese. And you probably heard the joke, right? You can hear someone Japanese say hi, hi. It really means like I hear you, not like yes. But if you're hearing it in English, you're hearing the word yes, but it has a different meaning. And then if you scale that up in the overall language, it does have a different logic structure. And so you get a different logic pattern than you might get in English. And it made me think, if you peel back someone's skin and you just and their brain and their skulls, and they were just a brain in a vat sitting there, we're all the same. Like we're all literally the same. It doesn't matter where on earth a human is born, we're all the same. The brain is, about 3.5 pounds. It uses 20 watts of power. What matters is how it's programmed. And the language that you program it in makes a big difference in how it thinks.
And what are some examples of that kind of non-linear way of reasoning, way of thinking specifically?
I mean, for me, some of the things we've done have been very counterintuitive, right? Like, why would we, in the same fund we invest in Tesla, we might invest in, an industrial asset, right? Way back one of the old days. And that is nonlinear. That is applying many of the lessons we learn maybe in the industrial world to technology. That's not a linear progression. You look at that and you say, well, that looks very nonlinear, man, and it is very nonlinear. And I think that I probably would not have done the things I've done and seen the things I've seen the way I see them if I hadn't studied Japanese, if I didn't have some of that base program in my brain.
And I'm interested, this is kind of a fun question, but knowing what you know today, if you were to learn any language in the world as your first language, what would it be? Still Japanese or English? I mean, Japanese, English, Spanish, or
And I
really?
mean, I think
Yeah.
I think it's my first language. I learned English. I
Okay.
think I think English is lingua franca. Anywhere in the world
Yeah.
today, people speak English, and and decision makers speak English. It has become the common language of humanity, I think, in many ways. I think if I ever learned a second language, but if you ask me for advice, I think about it two ways. I felt very called to study Japanese. I love the culture, I love food, love the people, and so there's like a personal interest in learning a language and loving a culture that's really interesting. I think that's a smart thing to do. Um, and just it's a beautiful thing to do, right? You enhance your life and you enhance your understanding of humanity in that way. If you told me that you wanted like the most useful language in the world, what would I go learn? I'd probably tell you to learn, Spanish, because that's a language it's commonly spoken in America, and I think it's also a beautiful language and just the wonderful literature to experience and wonderful cultural experience. Or I might tell you to learn Arabic. I think that I spent a lot of time in the Middle East recently, over the last decade or so. I think this is a culture that we need to understand very well here in the United States, and we would be wise to have our young people learn Arabic and some time in the Middle East, understand that culture because there's many beautiful things about that culture. Same thing, beautiful, beautiful poetry, beautiful literature, and a wonderful deep history.
That's a unique perspective. I don't hear a lot of that. And so you, after Georgetown, you kind of go to law school and you founded MG Capital while in law school, if I'm correct, which I consider like the precursor to Valor, your first real
Yeah,
fund
yeah,
firm. And one thing you did in that was help scale a plating company, if I'm correct, from 10 million to $120 million in revenue. And around that
yeah.
same time, you met David Sachs at law school, and then you also met through him, if I'm correct, Elon. So I'm super interested in that kind of time in your life. It seems like it was extremely, extremely kind of formative. It opened many doors. So I'd love for you to just like tell me about the what the chapter of your life was like, um, and what doors do you think it opened? Yeah.
So there was a stop between there at Goldman Sachs. So I finished, undergrad. I did 2 years undergrad, 1 year in Japan, and then 2 years grad school at Georgetown School of Foreign Service.
Okay.
Um, Went to Goldman. They almost by accident ended up at Goldman Sachs. Wanted to be a development economist, so I went to Georgetown, and then didn't like it. Had a job at the bank as a consultant. We were doing some work there and didn't like it, so I ended up going to work at Goldman. And when I was at Goldman, I realized that I really wanted to make something. I wanted to make a product for a living. I wanted to actually physically make something and be of service in some way that was just different than working on Wall Street. So I went to law school really to please my father. That's the truth. My mom passed away when I was in high school, and my father had convinced himself and all of us, the children, that their primary objective of life is that all their kids have doctorate degrees. So my brothers are doctors, just a dentist. I was going to be the lawyer. That was like the deal. So he really wanted this, and I had internalized that as my goal for him. So I went to law school to please him, but I didn't want to be a lawyer at all. So I didn't want to waste my time completely, and I thought it'd be cool to make something. So I started looking around for a little company to buy. And back this is like in the mid '90s, right? '95. The idea of a fundless sponsor, it wasn't a thing. It was like it was a young kid trying to buy a company, and I found this plating company that was the subsidiary of a bankrupt business called KDI that I was able to buy, and it played connectors. So wanted to be involved in the internet, and this is again 1995, right? Internet started to scale up, and connectors are the internet backbone. So this was like the least costly way, the most value based way you could get into the internet business would be to do plating of connectors, which is what I ended up buying back in my first year of law school. And yeah, so I spent what I realized in law school pretty early on was that I went to Chicago where they had blind grading. So it was you get a number and you sign a seating chart when went to class. So I figured after the first quarter or so that if you didn't sign a seating chart, the teacher would never know you weren't there. So I didn't have to go to class. I just could show up and take exams, give my number. And I met David Sachs the first day of law school. David Sachs was a brilliant law student. I mean, really brilliant law student. Probably could have been a Supreme Court clerk if he wanted to be. I'm very certain he could have been. And he, was a brilliant man generally, but he's a brilliant law student. So we became friends, and he would give me his notes, and I would use his notes, his outlines and stuff to save my exams, and then we'd trade notes with other people for for our outlines for their outlines, and I kind of became an outline trader. So that's how I got through law school and how I met David and we became friends. And then he went to work at PayPal after law school. After the stint at McKinsey, went to PayPal. And Elon was the CEO. PayPal and X merged, and Elon was the CEO of PayPal. Had started MG by that time, as you point out. And we were just raising money from a few clients at a time. We ended up investing in PayPal, and that's how I met Elon. So yeah, it's and as you're in high school and you've got lots of hopefully high school kids that listen to this, you don't know, you never know, what's going to happen, who's going to go where. What matters, I think, most, I just gave my own kids advice that went to college is the golf into life is like, you want to be with people with great values that you respect. Like if you surround yourself with great values you respect, I think you'll find that those relationships, those friendships are really valuable in life. Not just at work, but they're just valuable friendships. And I've been blessed to have friends from middle school, high school, college, law school that I've kept all the way through, and some I've got to work with, like David. Others we're friends, and it's just amazing. So yeah, I think the most important lesson in that is, you know, you just don't know. If you surround yourself with great people that have good values, who are smart, you respect, interesting things can happen.
Yeah. And I also think there's a kind of environment of people planning out a little bit too much in this day and age, thinking they're going to be X, Y, doing X and Y for 5 years and then doing this for 10 years. And it's life comes at you.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time, like in any strategy game, a firm fixed position is weak. If you think about it, the problem with the strategy of like, I'm going to plan my life over 10 years is the world is moving so fast. You have no idea what's going to happen. If you chase something, by the time you get there, it's might be gone, right? It doesn't work. It doesn't work as a strategy. You have to be very flexible. What's going to happen because the future's changing so fast. It's probabilistic uncertain. The future is probabilistic uncertain, and so what's important is you make great decisions along the way, and that gets you to an outcome that is good for you in the long run.
And love to just start focusing on kind of like the beginning of Valor. So if I'm correct, you start Valor in 1995 or kind of like the precursor to it.
Yep.
Tell me about that, kind of why you started it, what went into it, the early days. And then after that, I'd love for you to kind of go through the evolution of Valor up until today. But in terms of what do you believe are the most formative investments that kind of shaped your framework that you still have today?
Yeah, look, I mean, we took that little playing company. It was 10 million in revenue and about 9,000 EBITDA. I learned how to operate because I had to. I read a book called The Gold I got from a friend of mine in business school and gave it to all my platers. And they helped us improve the throughput of that factory using the thing called the theory of constraints. And, that was super formative. I mean, being a plant manager, really learning operations from the ground up was super formative for me. So that first iteration was really in building that company, the Connector company, which you mentioned. It went from 10 million to 125 million revenue in about 5-6 years, and then we sold it right before in 2001. We bought an auto parts company, fixed and sold it. It made a few technology investments, namely one at PayPal, which is how I met Elon and some of those guys. But that was really that we're really operators. We were buying, I'd say, older industrial assets that were in the connector supply chain. So stamping, plating, molding, assembly, fixing them and making them grow fast using a lot of leverage. So 95% leverage. And it became very clear when you use that kind of leverage, you need to make money. Return on capital matters. And what we were able to do with our operational skills and what really was then was theory constraints, which is how you make something go faster, right? Make it velocity go up in the system, and quality, which is Six Sigma at that time, is now combining called lean. That lean toolkit was super important, and we still use it today. So it's kind of 95 to 2001 or so. In that period, we start the firm. We go from buying companies, one office operators into a fund business, and really don't know what we're doing. If you look at those first couple of funds, there's industrial assets, there's like a tree farm, there's all kinds of stuff in there. There's a ski resort, and then there's Tesla and a few other technology assets because of all the relationships we had, and learn that the skills we had, the operating skills we kept with us. We had a group called it's an operations group, we now called the Scale Group, that did lean operations. That was super important. It helped us not just with I call it controlled turnarounds we're doing, but also with the growth companies. And we learned that the technology companies are often a really great core product, but the other stuff around building a business and scale, they need help with. And those are the things we knew because we'd done them as operators and that we'd done a lot of, right? So it's like if you're starting a company first time and you're a great technologist, you know how to build the product, you know how to make the drivetrain for a car, but the stuff about making the whole car is actually, it's new to you. right? Making auto parts or making manufacturing stuff at that scale wasn't new to us, but it was new to the people that were doing it. So we could be valuable to the world by focusing those skills on technology assets. So if phase one was operators, phase two is kind of like fun business figuring it out. Phase three is we get rid of the turnaround business. We then decide to go focus on technology and keep our operating skills into what's called the scale group and define our companies we're investing in as customers and ask yourselves the question, how do we serve these people really well? And if we serve them really well, then that will drive everything else, drive the deal flow, and ultimately returns will be a consequence of building great companies. And we decided this mission that we want to invest in great companies and make the world better with great entrepreneurs and support them and really serve them. And adopt a Lao Tzu quote into our firm, which is in all of our conference rooms, that is about servant leadership. And it's basically that leaders best when the people say we did this ourselves. And that is our ethos. That's our operating ethos. We're here to serve. We're to serve great companies making the world better. That's kind of the iteration we are in today. So over time, we scaled. As a result of that, we've had a growth fund that has grown over time, and then we had early stage vehicles, and we used to make small early stage investments off the balance sheet, so that we would seed ideas for the growth fund. That then went into the fund because it did well, and that turned into a venture strategy. It now has two separate venture funds, verticalized venture funds. One in sustainability, that's all about food tech, retail tech, consumer. That's called VSV. And the other is the VAI, which is our artificial intelligence fund in partnership with Trades. So that's how the evolution of the firm happened. It really happened because we were trying to figure out how to be more valuable and more valuable to the world by investing in these companies that are making the world great.
I was supposed to interview Gavin this Tuesday, but it seems like we're going to do it mid-December. But I'm
Okay,
so you guys have a lot of interviews
he's a great
scheduled.
guy. He's a great guy, and a great friend. And I met him because he was he was one of the first investors in Tesla. I was lead director, and he was like I call it the lead portfolio manager at Fidelity, and was just a awesome guy, and super supportive of the company. We were just coming out of the gate in our IPO, and Fidelity bought 15% of everything we ever issued. They were wonderful investors, and he was the lead person there. He's really great. I hope you get to interview him.
For sure, and looking forward to it. And if I had to kind of explain to someone today who knew nothing about investing, venture, private equity as a whole, and I had to explain to them what Valor does in like one or two sentences, what would you concentrate it as, or what would you call it?
Yeah, I mean, we were looking for companies that are making a little better, that are growing very fast, and that also have high return on capital. Those are the two basic metrics, right? So it's like I think much of the world, many people talk to that are in the venture business or in the growth business and technology, they focus on high growth, high revenue growth. That's important. But man, if you don't someday make money, it won't work. And so to generate capital, return capital, you have to actually have a system, a machine that makes money. So the company itself is, if you're going to make a machine, it's the machine to make the machine. And that machine must be very, very efficient producer of capital.
And I think something that Valor does that's very unique and a kind of framework you guys have is proentropic investing. And I picked this up from the podcast you did with Patrick O'Shaughnessy, who I consider a friend. And so what is a proentropic company or founder?
Yeah. So this is from the second law of thermodynamics, right? So entropy is increasing no matter what. I mean, you can't. It's like the fundamental law of physics of the universe, right? And so and the second, that's the second law. The third law is you can't reduce it past zero. Like there's the idea of like a stable long-term equilibrium is a fallacy. It doesn't. It might exist in economics and textbooks, but this is reality. So what we're getting here is we want companies that are really good at dealing with this change, rapid change. So chaos happening in the world, it's being set off because of it's creating less disruption set off, but we think because of deglobalization and because of technological change. There are companies that try to like tamp it down, that really want to have just stability, and there are companies that are good at reacting to it. And then there are very few companies, the very rare companies, that are really great at surfing it. They're really great at benefiting from it, and they know how to take that energy out of the environment. Other companies have done poorly and used to their benefit. I mean, the best example of this is Tesla, right? So Tesla, when we buy this factory from the GM bankruptcy, the Fremont factory, that is a good example of like here's a company that was a bad producer of capital. It had low return on capital, made bad products at a bad time, and then a bad time in history when there was a huge event set off, made it go bankrupt. Out of that GM bankruptcy, we buy this factory. It's that factory took billions of dollars to create. We bought it for pennies on the dollar. We took all of that capital, which is really pent up energy, sitting there, and repurposed it to make Tesla cars. And Tesla today is what it is today because we were able to buy that factory for such a low price at that time in history. That's the ultimate proentropic move. I mean, it is literally the world's falling apart. We will decide to go buy this factory instead for pennies on the dollar and make cars.
And to be a pro-tropic investor, I guess the underlying belief you have to have is the world's going to get more chaotic. So I'm interested in how you think about kind of going forward. Is the world going to get more tropic or chaotic in a sense? And how do you guys plan on writing that?
I think it is. I think it is. I think it's like a sine wave. There'll be local mins and local maxes. There'll be moments when it feels stable and moments when it doesn't. But you want to invest in people and companies that are really good at understanding how to ride those waves and how to benefit from them, how to benefit from that chaos. Chaos is the ladder, right? You're going up or you're going down, depending on how you deal with it. And you just have to accept it, right? You got to be really good at mapping the whole probability state of the future, so you aren't surprised, right? If you get surprised, your brain can't function properly. Your brain, it uses 20 watts of power, and if you're surprised, it pulls that power to your safety systems away from your cognitive systems. If you're not surprised, you can actually act. You can think carefully. You can act. And so people that are proentropic, companies that are proentropic, are really good at doing that. They're good at predicting the environment, shaping that environment, and making the future.
And you just talked about sine curves, and you also mentioned a kind of couple laws in physics. I'm interested in how kind of just physics as a whole, you seem to take a lot of things kind of in your investment thesis from physics, and you seem to think in a way that's kind of tied to physics as a whole. How do you think physics shaped your thinking, and yeah, why do you love it, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, like, so, I mean, physics is the base law of the universe, right? These are like the immutable laws, and the theory of constraint itself was designed and popularized by Goldratt in The Goal. He was a physicist, and he was describing how to sort of optimize a closed system, like a manufacturing company. A company is sort of an open and closed system, but he was describing how to optimize a closed system. The three laws of thermodynamics, right? The first law is energy is conserved, can't be destroyed, but it can be transformed. This is return on capital, return on invested capital, right? You could take energy, money is energy, you could put it into a system, you could transform it into something else. If you do that really efficiently, you will win. If you do it really inefficiently, you will lose. The most efficient people at making that transformation are the ones that win over time. That's why ROIC, return on invested capital, is an important part of our investment thesis, right? The second law of thermodynamics, entropy is increasing over time. That's the way it is. I mean, like it, don't like it, doesn't matter. You can get good at dealing with that. Eventually, maybe it destroys the entire universe and something else happens. Who knows? But until that happens, you can get good at dealing with it, or you can actually try to fight it. If you try to fight it, you're going to lose. That's a reality. So we're looking for. That's why we talk proentropic. People that are good at it, but good at dealing with that entropy and riding it and benefiting from it. And the third is that entropy. The law of thermodynamics is that entropy can't be reduced past zero. It will never be reduced to zero. It's going to be there no matter what. There may be moments of stability, but they're like fooling you. It's under the surface. It's just going to break out in some way. And you want to predict how that's going to happen as best you can by using probabilistic thinking. It's Bayesian probability mapping, but probabilistic thinking. That's informed, developed our entire investment thesis.
I think it's incredible. And it's one of the more unique theses I've heard, and I I have this kind of I don't know theory that I think the most successful in investors in the world either it can be a mix, but either are very innately talented at something, like an example would be Steve Cohen. I think he's very innately talented at trading, or take a different perspective towards an industry that's like very commonly traded. And so I think what you guys do is kind of a mix of both of those things. I think from what I can tell, you guys you're a very innately talented investor, but then you also kind of take these principles and invest off of them. I'm interested in you don't invest in a company, or so I heard that you don't know for at least 6 months. And so when assessing kind of both the founder and the business, you brought up this idea of asymmetric information in past interviews. How do you
Yeah.
think about asymmetric information over the due diligence process, and what ways does asymmetric information manifest itself?
Yeah. So we want to write a small check, a bigger check, a bigger check, a bigger check, a bigger check over time. And we want to do that because that we develop information asymmetries, like you're describing. What that means is we write a small check in your company. We get to know you. We get to find out if our values aligned. Do we believe in the same things? We behave the same way? And will you execute? It's pretty simple. Believe it or not, past performance does indicate future performance. It actually does. So watching someone over time, you get to know what's going to happen. You have a good chance of seeing them go through good times and bad times. And 6 months is long enough to figure out to know someone's telling you the truth. That 6 month guideline started out because in the early days we were good at predicting the macro, we were good at predicting the micro, like all the math and all the analysis. That was all good, but we were getting fooled by people that were bad. just bad people. And it turns out that it takes about 6 months to figure out someone's bad. If I tell you the truth, and you have to have multiple interactions to figure that out with multiple people. And so that 6 month, it's really a rule. It's a guideline, not a rule, I should say. Um, about 90% of the stuff we do follows that rule because it allows us to understand someone and how if we're values aligned. Our values are humility, integrity, responsibility, and excellence. And if we're values aligned and we can value you as like valuable investors because our scale group can help you, we think we're the best investors in the world for you. We can serve you well. If we're not, then we're not the right guys for you.
And in the due diligence process, do you think it's essential that you kind of see the founder with them or with the company in a time of chaos, in a time of what they're not really doing well, and that's when these kind of values come to surface?
And you probably won't see that in 6 months. You might see it, you might
Yeah.
not. But what you will hear enough, you'll learn enough to see how they're performing over time and what they're telling you and how that measures up against reality. Right. That's the most important thing. And then over a longer period of time, measured in years, and look at the best investments we have, they go on for years. You've been in SpaceX for like well over a decade now. Tesla, the same thing. I still hold my Tesla share. It's been well over a decade. You see how people behave over time, and you see them in good times and bad times, and they see you in good times and bad times. And yeah, you get to know someone really well in the bad times, and when they're great in the bad times, that's when you want to keep adding more capital. It's very counterintuitive, right? When you know someone well, and you know the management well, you know the company well, something bad happens. That's the time to double down. That's really the time because you have the conviction, you know the people, you know how they're going to respond. Um, that's when you make the best investment decisions.
And you talk about this concept of vector alignment, which is also a concept within physics. How would you, for people that don't know, how would you define kind of vector alignment within an organization, within investing as a whole? And what common cultural themes have you seen across the companies that you think have the strongest vector alignment?
This vector alignment thing we brought from Elon. So he has this statement, which is a company as the sum total of the vectors of the people working it, right? And the alignment part, really we think is about values and mission. So if you have alignment on values in a company, like what are the underlying values of the social system, and what is the mission that people are on? When you have those things aligned, that naturally aligns the vectors. One of the reasons that we like mission-driven companies is because it's easy to align vectors when you have a great mission. You will attract great people. Those people will typically share values, and they'll be on target on that mission.
And I'm interested in, you talk about psychopaths a bit, and you say you see them a lot in places like law and places like investing and kind of these very high performing places. Tell me about psychopaths.
I mean, so think about this as the what creates a psychopath is an anomaly in the amygdala. They don't feel compassion, they don't feel guilt the same way a normal brain does. And then you probably abuse them some way in childhood, so they can have antisocial behaviors. The anomaly itself is in about 5% of the population. So the human brain is normally distributed, right? 5% are like have this anomaly, and 5% are they have overdeveloped amygdalas and probably very compassionate people. Um, we are looking for those kinds of people. That often someone who is really at the edge, not telling the truth or doing bad stuff, can look like a great entrepreneur because they're risk takers who are at the edge of it. And people that are really good entrepreneurs are also very optimistic. So they are telling they believe what they're saying to you. They typically are overestimating what's going to happen. The difference between that is someone who's not telling the truth, and it takes time to figure that out, right? So that's where 6 months comes from. It takes time to figure that out, and you've got to triangulate different meetings, different statements, what they're telling you, and what you think is actually the truth. But look, our professions will attract great people and they will attract bad people. That's the reality. My baseline forecast was always that everyone was good. Grew up in Graham's mission, right? Everyone's good. What I had to learn was, no, everyone's not good. And we actually hired a psychologist to help us figure this out. And what we learned was, look, 5% of the people in the world have this rate anomaly. And what the psychologist told us was probably 10% of them. Think about your base rate forecast in your professions, right? 10%. Because entrepreneurship is a power profession like law, like medicine, like politics, etc.
Not only in investing, but when you're kind of looking for people to invest for Valor or work for Valor, how does that process of first of all looking for psychopaths, looking for people that kind of see the world from base principles, from first principles, and kind of these different theories of yours shape can manifest itself in the way you hire people.
We look for it in our interview process, and then we measure for it in the first couple of years. Someone's with the firm. Usually, within the first 2 years, we'll figure it out if someone's values aligned. Look, there's lots of good people in the world that aren't values aligned, so it doesn't make them psychopaths. But it is, they're just not for us. We're just, we're certain flavor of ice cream. You might love ice cream, but we're pistachio. We're not chocolate. We're not vanilla. We're pistachio. We're a very unique flavor of ice cream, and you got to want that flavor. So we do look for it in our interview process. We screen for it, and we ask through the questions we ask. We ask questions about your background, your history, your friendships, the longevity of them, the challenge you had in life. Have you gone through them? Have you dealt with them? There's a lot of questions that might seem a little counterintuitive to people who are asking because we're trying to understand not just the person's capacity that we can pretty easily figure out just with a model test or whatever. We're trying to understand the actual human, like what makes them tick. Are they really values aligned with us? Are they really mission aligned with us?
And throughout the kind of history of Valor, you've had multiple, I guess we call them iterations or specific periods where you do relatively different things and you've kind of evolved over time. And one of my friends, his name is Mickey Malka, has this very interesting perspective on killing something before it kills you. And so this is just kind of random that I brought this up, but I'm interested in how you think about the next evolution of Valor. Where do you see Valor going in the future? And yeah.
It's an interesting question, actually. And I tell this to people all the time, which is, look, I don't know what we're doing in 15, 20 years. I have no idea. The world's changing so fast. I know that if we have our mission, which is to serve great founders and great companies making the world better. We hold under our values. We'll be adding value to the world. We'll be here and we'll be here for 100 years doing the same thing. It's not clear to me exactly how that will be expressed. We think about our companies, we think about how to serve them, what they need. So the products in our scale group, as an example, they change over time. Right? We used to recruiting, became a commodity. We don't do it. We might do it again now because that's changing too. So it's it's hard to predict. It's hard to predict. I can predict kind of 3 to 5 years out. I can tell you we can do more of the same. It's working. We keep going. But if we don't keep evolving as an organization, we will die.
Yeah.
All organizations will die. And particularly in an environment that's very chaotic and things are changing so fast, you have to evolve. And the North Star of our evolution is what do the great companies are serving need? How can we serve them best? So if you think our products are developing, right? We're developing because we're seeing opportunities to serve companies in these areas, and then we're evolving products to serve those companies.
Yes, you evolve with those companies. And I'm interested in you started off as an operator and then to an extent and then became an investor. And I'm interested in how you think about kind of let's not touch on operations in terms of how you think about solving problems. So I think that Valor is a very interesting perspective on how you go about problems and a very kind of specific framework about it. I'd love for you to describe that framework on how Valor solves problems within the companies that invest in.
Yeah, there's a Japanese word called gemba, which is part of the lean methodology. It's you go to the place where work is being done. You will see our teams and our people going directly to the place where work's being done and looking at first principles, what's actually happening. Like, what is the actual problem? You can't do this from an office in New York, Chicago, or Palo Alto. You have to go to the place. And when you go to the place, you're going to find that the problems become pretty obvious when you start asking the right questions. And so I think it's approaching this from first principles with a lot of humility. So it's recognize you don't know. You might have a process. We have a process to figure things out, right? Current state map, future state mapping, like that. Those are all lean tools. But the actual questions you're asking are of the people that are doing the actual work. And you'll find that if you ask the right questions of the people doing the work, they already have the answers to the problems. No one's ever actually asked them. It's pretty easy to figure it out once you get there and start really doing that kind of work.
And you've studied kind of the human brain a lot. And from what it seems like, you seem like a very, very level-headed and rational person from the 30 minutes we've been conversating. And you talk a lot about kind of cognitive bias in decision making. And I think it's very interesting. I've interviewed two behavioral economists on this podcast. So what does a day in the life of Antonio Gracias look like in terms of minimizing bias and improving clarity of thought?
I mean, it's a great question, actually. Look, I try to differentiate in my day what's a really important decision and what's not. So, it's not that important. You just flow through your default states, your cognitive biases, and you let them operate. Because the word bias has a negative connotation in society. It really isn't negative. It's a default state. The cognitive diversity identifies as default state. It's there because the brain is a very efficient machine. It's a very, very efficient computer, and it has to actually have these biases so it can actually get through the day. I try to differentiate between which of the decisions I'm making are like it's okay to go to the flow state and just let them happen, which are really important. If it's really important, then I try to go first principles and construct up the argument, the hypothesis that we're operating under. If I can't do that, if we made a mistake, so now we're like diagnosing error, we use root cause analysis. And then I use time. I mean, the reason people say like sleep on it is because actually most of your thinking is happening in the background. And giving yourself time if you have time to allow yourself to think and let your brain process will clear most of the stuff out over time. But it's really just discernment about what's important, what's not. And I spend the first couple hours of my day doing without a computer, reading actual. And often I use paper because I don't want to be distracted by whatever's on my phone and emails coming in. Right? It's the discernment of what's important, what's not important, and then having time open to your day to really think.
And both you and Valor, as an extension of you, ha have these kind of very specific frameworks. I'm interested in where gut and intuition plays a role in your investment process and how you think as a whole.
So it's important to ask the question, what is intuition, right? Intuition is your brain is taking in a bunch of information and making like a snap judgment. And often that is correct. It can be correct. The problem is that at times it is not correct. So I think if you are in a high stake situation, so in a high expected value situation, even if your intuition is telling you go or don't go, it's smart to just pause if you have the time, step back and think about why. Like, why am I feeling this? And root cause that intuition, and then verify that it's correct. Almost always you have the time. Most people think these decisions are time pressure. They're very, very few, unless you're a trader, right, like Steve Gold or something. Um, you're really not that time pressured. Like in our business, we're not that time pressured. And so it's important to take the time when something really matters. Think about it carefully from first principles.
And you mentioned Tesla and briefly mentioned SpaceX, and you've been close to Elon, an investor in his company for, I think, around 2 decades now at this
Yeah.
point. What are the greatest lessons you've learned from him that you don't really hear anyone else talking about?
I mean, I think the things about him that are, I've learned a lot from him, by the way, and I definitely wouldn't be me without him. And the things that I've learned and observed him, the first thing I think he does, he's very, very proentropic, right? He pushes the probability map to the very edge. He sees it, to him, if it's possible in the physics, it's possible, period. He will fight for things that have low probability of success, but high expected value outcomes. So making rockets land, this seemed almost impossible, right? But it was worth doing because even though it was almost impossible, it was possible. It had low probability but high expected value, and it's very, very valuable to society. It's hugely valuable to humanity to do that. Right? I think that's the first thing. The second thing is he's very courageous. I mean, these are like encouraged. By the way, it's not the absence of fear. It's action in the face of fear. He does that extremely well. I think the third thing is super mission driven. I think we developed our mission driven hypothesis because we learned from him and others that mission driven companies do better because they attract better people. It's easier to align all the vectors if you're on a mission. And part of being mission driven is because he's very compassionate. I mean, he's a very compassionate human. He cares about humanity deeply, and he wants what's best for humanity. That's why he's doing what he's doing. Um, I mean, those have been very important lessons for us, and very important lessons for me as a person.
And I have one last question I ask every single guest on my podcast. I'm 16 right now. If you had to give one piece of advice, it can be any kind of advice, career, life, even romantic advice to a 16-year-old today, what would it be?
And I think cutting across all those domains, I would say focus on values and purpose. Like, don't worry about the thing so much. It's impossible to predict where the world's going to be, but focus on what your values are going to be. What do you really believe in? What are your core values? And what purpose do you want to serve? I talk to young people all the time that are facing what I call the tyranny of options. They want to know, I got to find the thing I want to do. What is that thing? And the reality is, it doesn't matter actually. There are few humans in the world that are born with like a purpose like this. Elon wanted to build rockets when he was 12 years old. My brothers wanted to be surgeons. That's a gift. I didn't have that gift. But what happens if you focus on your values and purpose? I wanted to be of service to humanity. Um, you'll find you associate with people that do that same thing, organizations that those same things, with people you respect, and doors will open. You work hard, learn to love the thing you do, focus on its values and purpose, right? Find that thing, learn to love it, work hard at it, really give it all of your effort and with excellence. And then more doors will open over time and just keep going. And if you make great decisions as you go along, you'll have a great life. Your life is the sum total of the compounding effect of all your decisions. If you make great decisions based on your values and on your purpose, the mission you want to serve, you will end up in a great place.
And I think it's much easier said than done sticking to those values across time as you get, like you said, bombarded with opportunities. And I have kind of a short follow-up question to that, which is, what impact does Antonio Gracias hope to have on the world?
Man, I think there are three things that I will leave on this earth, right? The first are my family, my children. And that's probably the most important thing I will ever do, the most enjoyable thing in my life. And the second is through Valor, the companies we have served. We're trying to make the world a better place by serving great companies. Um, and the third is the philanthropy I do. I have a few things I'm really passionate about, but those are the three things I want to leave. And history will may never remember me, but hopefully the things that I do, those three things that I do will reverberate through time.
Well, thank you for coming on, Antonio. I really appreciate it. It was a very enjoyable episode and appreciate taking the time.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.